Warning, this podcast contains violence, sexuality, gore, and other horrible and disturbing things. Listener discretion is advised. Also, the hosts of this venture are ignorant dipshits, so please do not take anything they say as fact. And enjoy the show.
Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then we'll begin.
Today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be.
It is our basic human right to be forgotten.
A second plane now has crashed into the other tower of the World Trade Center.
Putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
The defendant shall be incarcerated for the rest of her natural life with no possibility of parole.
You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men.
We were somewhere around Barstow, on the edge of the desert, when the drugs began to take hold.
Occultae Veritatis.
Welcome back to Occultae Veritatis. I am Richard Bigley, and in studio with me today I have...
St. Mary!
Ood Gallifrey.
And for our lovely guests...
Selkie. And Ginger.
All right, so... In the darkness on June 12th of 1942, Nazi soldiers were camped up on the Eastern Front along the Maas, Severity Dante, and the Don Rivers, and they were awakened to explosions. Scrambling, there was no warning about the fire that rained down from above. What could that have been? And now it's time for some poison.
So, what's your poison? So, what's your poison?
Good one. I'm trying to ASMR this poison.
Oh, yeah.
I can hear it.
It's giving me goosebumps of
Good.
anticipation.
Good.
This is Apothic Red.
Yeah. The tiny size of the glass is convincing me that I'm drinking port, so I'm happy with this.
It's making me feel like a giant bitch.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, look at how big my hands look.
I'm sorry. I grabbed the first glasses I
I
seen.
am a giant bitch.
Yeah,
Apothic
But like
Red.
a giant bitch. It's different.
Extra giant.
Like
super mono.
The attack of the 50-foot bitch. Like,
Yeah. Not like I'm a giant bitch. Like I'm a giant bitch.
Yeah.
You know.
It
Like
could
I
be
will
both,
step.
though.
I will step on your
Right.
car.
Hey.
Don't fuck
Could be
with me.
both.
Yeah.
I bet the 50-foot woman was a giant bitch.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, so, I don't know.
It's delicious. I like it.
I love it. It's a good wine. It's a good red wine. Not really a big red wine fan, but
What?
it's good. It's good. I like the Apothic White.
Oh, me too.
Yes.
I
it's
actually am not a
delicious.
big red wine fan, but this is the only red wine that I will drink.
Oh.
It's a good solid red wine.
I love red wine.
I'll give it a 7 of 10.
I give it like an 8 to 10. I drink red wine every day.
I don't have the palate to determine good wine or bad wine, but this is good. I like it. Yeah, it's not offensive. It's nice.
Red wine is like a hug inside you.
I'm gonna give it a 7 out
It's
of
not
10.
really a Malbec or anything.
No,
but, like,
definitely
it'll
not
do.
I love Malbec.
Oh,
Capiche?
we are going to be really good friends
Yep.
here.
Malbec's my favorite, man.
What's a Malbec?
It's like really smoky.
Yes, hella smoky.
Yeah.
Speaking of smoky,
ASMR.
I could really do this
It's like
forever.
rolling a joint.
That's actually a great idea for
ASMR
video.
Weed edition.
Yes.
I rolled-
Yes.
I rolled my first joint on the podcast. We did that for a poison. Ood learns how to roll a joint. Because all mine looked like wet fucking diapers before that. So. Couldn't tell which end to smoke out of, I tell you.
Oh,
Anybody have a fear of mouth sounds out there?
I don't like mouth sounds.
I love mouse sounds.
Oh, yes.
But
Should actually make that like a type of ASMR.
It
where
is.
it's like really nice and soothing, and then all of a sudden you just yell something.
Oh my god!
You never know when it's gonna happen.
just to alarm someone.
Yes, this is my niche in the ASMR world.
There
It's
you
like
go.
my personality.
Somebody's
in
gonna be
ASMR.
into it somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I'm into it.
It's nice to relax in 20 minutes and then just a fucking air raid siren.
There's got to be somebody who has like anxiety triggers as their kink.
Oh, absolutely.
That exists. That's something I ran into a bunch in the kink community. Is a bunch of people working through their traumas through kinks. That was kind of inspiring to see.
Oh.
There you go.
There we go. That's perfect.
I hope you're all at least 3% as high as I am from that ASMR.
I feel better.
I'm going to rate this wine 6 out of 10.
I think I rated 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think an 8.
Yes. Now we're going to talk about some badass Russian women bombing fascists, so I think weed and wine is a good combo for that.
Yeah.
It is, yes.
The large-scale industrialization of the Soviet Union in the late 1920s and 1930s opened up the country's economy for women in the workplace, and there was indeed no job for which a woman could not apply. Soviet propaganda encouraged them to join the workforce and steer the great machines of modernization, and the most fantastic symbol of that particular age of machines was the airplane. Many were inspired by Soviet heroine Marina Raskova, who set world records for long-distance flights, showing what pilots and planes from the Soviet Union could achieve. Newly emerging and quite popular flying clubs were also a chance for many women to escape the monotony, or the poverty, of their homes and learn how to become an aircraft mechanic or even a pilot themselves. Fast forward to the summer of 1941. Weeks after the German invasion, hundreds of thousands of Soviet women flocked to the colors, enlisting as nurses, signalers, or anti-aircraft gunners. The experienced female pilots of the flying club served as instructors and advisors for male recruits, but were not allowed themselves to fly into combat. The argument was that there were enough male pilots available. Marina Raskova, however, was determined to make a difference. With her influence in Moscow's political circles as a hero of the Soviet Union, she appealed to Stalin himself and got permission to create 3 all-female flying units: the 586 Fighter Regiment, the 587 Heavy Bomber Regiment, and the 588 Night Bomber Regiment.
All right. So the Russian Polikarpov U-2 was a training aircraft and a general-purpose, Soviet biplane. Very simply designed, 2
General purpose Soviet biplane is the name of your sex tape. Sorry, that was lazy.
That was lazy. Yeah, that was.
Sorry, that's the name of
Maybe
his
the
dog.
guy's right about his criticism.
That was all
No,
there.
okay.
being bi or pansexual could be described as general purpose. With a stretch.
Well, it doubles your chances of getting a date, I think, too.
Yes.
Yes. So, yeah, it was basically simply designed, very reliable, making it a good training aircraft.
Simply designed and very reliable is the name of your sex tape.
There we go. Just in and out missionary style. That's all it is. Very simple.
Reliable.
But it's reliable.
You've regained your clout once again, Sage.
Thanks.
Yes.
So the first one of these aircraft took flight on June 24th of 1927, and it was basically brought into the Soviet Air Force 2 years later in 1929, and it just basically remained in service in the Soviet Union well into the late 70s, actually.
Holy shit.
So they really got their dollars worth out of these aircraft.
Yeah.
So anyway, there was about 20 to 30,000 of them built out there, and they were basically made of a plywood frame and wrapped with canvas fabric. So, they're not your, nice aluminum, fancy, whatever we got today. These were very, very, simple aircraft.
Yeah.
So originally they bought them just to teach people how to fly, but then they kind of used them to transport, and follow other aircraft as well, just because it could, take off really quickly. You don't really need a whole lot of runway to take these things, to get these things into the air. So in World War II, it took on the roles of medical evacuation and dropping supplies for resistance fighters who were behind German lines. You're in some town occupied by Nazis, and this plane comes over, drops a crate full of guns or ammo or food or whatever it is that you need to fight them from the inside.
Oh yeah, and you need those kind of units because there's something called the tooth and claw theory of war. Your war unit does damage like a tiger does with its teeth and claws, but the tiger still needs the rest of its body to support it. So you need that logistical support in order to keep your soldiers fighting.
Yeah. They also use them to do reconnaissance. You put a camera, give the guy a camera, and he flies over, encampments or whatever, takes pictures and what have you.
First flown in 1928, The Russian Polikarpov PO-2 is thought to be the highest production aircraft type in history, with between 30 to 40,000 of these aircraft being built up until 1958. Like the Tiger Moth in the Commonwealth and the Boeing Stearman in the USA, the PO-2 was adapted for use in a great many roles, including pilot training, air ambulance, mail carrier, and agricultural aircraft. This PO-2 is painted to represent one of the aircraft flown by the Night Witches, the Russian female pilots, who carried out nighttime harassment attacks on German troop positions during World War II. Unfortunately, maintenance issues prevented the PO-2 from flying at the airshow, but the crowd was nevertheless impressed to see this rare aircraft taxi along the crowd line and to be able to hear the unique sound of the 5-cylinder Shvestov engine.
So anyway, in 1941, they did bombing trials using this aircraft, and then they later actually developed a military version of this aircraft, which was equipped for light bombing and was armed with a machine gun. It could carry 100 kilograms of bombs, so like 6 bombs.
So what's the difference between like light bombing and heavy bombing?
Well, I imagine heavy bombing would be like, you got a big ass thing that's just dropping a lot of shit on cities.
The other one is
whatever.
that like salt video.
Oh yeah,
sprinkle a little bit.
The salt, okay?
Yeah,
Salt Bay.
Yeah.
Is that
Salt
what it's
Bay?
called?
Yeah,
Salt Bay.
Just a little like.
Just a little, salt. It's the Salt Bay of the bombing world. Yes.
Thank you for clarifying. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good.
You know, he looked majestic, but I was always like low key grossed out by that video because I could see some of the salt like dripping off of his elbows onto the meat.
On his like big.
He was like, he needed to like unsnake that a little bit.
That's where the rest of the flavor comes from, I'm sure.
Oh, the elbow spice.
Up on his food safe.
You know, maybe I'm being judgmental. I've never tried elbow spice. No.
I'm sure you have.
Hey now. This is a family show. No, wait, no, it isn't.
The German troops nicknamed this aircraft the sewing machine because it would just make a loud rattling sound when it flew over. Yeah, they're like, it's a sewing machine, and that was what they nicknamed it. It was basically about 8 meters long and had a wingspan of like 11.4 meters. And it was about 3 meters tall. It was equipped with a 125 horsepower engine, which basically spun a 2-bladed propeller. It's not a jet aircraft. We're talking.
It's a prop. It's not a jet.
Yeah, it's basic. Its maximum speed, and it was 152 kilometers an hour.
That's not very fast
for a plane. That's like turtle speed.
Yeah, and it had a range of about 630 kilometers, so it could go 630 clicks before having to refuel. So it's kind of similar to my Honda Civic in all that regard.
Yeah. Sounds about right.
Did the Soviets use metric?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure they would. Google that
I feel
and let
like
us know.
probably.
Yeah.
So the maximum altitude was 3,000 meters, so like 3 kilometers up. Basically, that's just over 3 times the height of the Burj Khalifa building in Dubai. So, Google that tall building in Dubai, that picture. Well, you stack like 3 of those on top of each other, and that's about as high as this thing could go.
Yeah. Or watch the latest Mission Impossible. You can see Tom Cruise and his silly ass on it.
A native system of weights and measures was used in Imperial Russia and after the Russian Revolution, but it was abandoned after July 21st, 1925, when the Soviet Union adopted the metric system, per the order of the Council of People's Commissars.
Also, I think I've read somewhere that the difference between light and heavy bombing is whether it damages structures. Okay. Like whether it damages like structures of certain sizes.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this episode really isn't about the plane, but rather the 588th Night Bomber Regiment, which would later then become the 46th Taman Guards. So anyway, on October 8th...
Pass me one.
The Smirnoff.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm having a second poison. I'm a rebel.
So on October 8th, 1941, Stalin issued a order to create 3 women's Air Force units, which until then, women were not permitted to fly in combat. So the women of the 588th were volunteers, some of them in their teens to early 20s. I'll just let you do that then.
I'm not sorry.
Neither am I. You can have some more of this poison.
I will have both. I will double fist.
You know,
Can I have one of those poisons too?
Yeah.
It's interesting that, like, there's only certain cultures that use women in warfare. Like, something
the good ones.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. Like, something that freaked the Romans out was the Celts and the early barbarians coming in, and their women were equipped just as much as the men. And the Romans didn't know what to do with themselves. Like, Roman soldiers had a hard time attacking, like, the Celtic women and all that because they weren't used to it. And the Celtics fucking dominated them because of it.
I am no man.
Okay, so we need to take some lessons here and reinstall this. Not all men are scared to hit women, unfortunately.
Basically, these women, in their early 20s and, later teens were recruited into this unit. And the unit basically operated up until the end of the war.
I like to think that I would have joined.
Yeah.
On that. I'm like 100% that I would.
Blow up fucking Nazis? People get offended when one of them gets punched in the face. Like, imagine, you'd be...
Okay, I would have been one of the ones, back when I was, like, not had a kid. I would have been one of the ones that would, like, go and seduce them and, like, bring them into the forest and then just, like, and then just shoot them.
I'll just babysit the kids.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, so basically the unit consisted of 42-person crews, so like 80 people in total. Their attacks earned them the name among the Nazis as the Nahcthexen, which translates to night witches.
Oh, yeah.
The women basically took this.
Yeah.
The women took it as a compliment. They're like, fuck
Absolutely.
yeah.
Anytime someone calls me a witch, I'm like, thank you.
Yeah. Cue in the demonic guitar solo, because that's a badass name.
No, that's Henry's heavy metal guitar riff. I can't steal that from last podcast.
So the... Basically, these women ran 30,000 bombing missions over the 4 years. And I guess so much for the tolerant left.
So much for the tolerant left.
Yes.
In this, they dropped a mere 23,000 bombs on Nazis. Oh.
I love them.
And which basically helped chase the fuckers back to Berlin.
Good.
It's really good for just a little
so if you managed to shoot down a witch, they gave you an Iron Cross because they were incredibly hard to
Holy
shoot
shit.
down.
Shit.
So basically, here's how they worked. These women would fly in cold darkness of night in their like 14-year-old wood canvas airplanes into enemy lines.
That went 122 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, and they were exposed to like the cold Russian air in the night and the open cockpit of the plane. So there was no
Holy
heater.
shit.
It was open cockpit.
And
Open Cockpit is the name of your sex tape.
Oh, boy. On me.
So it's like you're in a Russian winter in an open cockpit plane, 3,000 meters above the ground, and about to drop bombs on some fucking Nazis.
Oh yeah, that's how you get frosty whiskers. Oh yeah.
Frosty whiskers.
Basically, you've got this plane that's basically like a crop duster with bombs, and no parachutes. They didn't have parachutes
Because fuck those.
They didn't have radios.
Nope.
For equipment, they had a compass and a map.
They're Russian. They just need to land on their heads and they'll be okay.
That's all you needed, Well, and if here's the thing about a wood and canvas airplane is that if like a tracer round from like artillery struck your plane, like you're fucked. Okay, like that thing just ignites and that's the end of it.
And for those of you who don't know, a tracer round is a round that has some phosphorus on it. So when it flies through the air, it actually becomes superheated and lights up.
Yeah, just so that you can see, like if you're shooting at night, so you can kind of see what the hell you're shooting at, or where your gun is sending the bullets.
Yeah. Yeah, if you watch Dunkirk or most military movies, when they're doing the machine gun nest, you see like every few bullets is like a glow in the dark one. It looks like, even though it's broad daylight. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. So if a tracer round stuck, it was that basically game over. It just lights up like a cigarette on a cigarette paper under a lighter. That was basically it. Uniforms for these ladies were basically hand-me-downs from That was what they had for uniforms, was these old uniforms for that men had worn, in the army, and here's your uniform, and
they're all like big and baggy.
They're big and baggy, and exactly.
That goes along with what the Russians were dealing with at that time. Like they had something called 2-gun units and 3-gun units, where like near the beginning of the war, they had 2-gun units, and that meant that there was 1 gun shared between 2 people. And if the first guy died, then you get to use the gun. Near the end of the war, when guns were even more rare, they had 3-gun units. So if you wanted to use the gun, you had to wait for 2 guys to die. Or women. Yeah.
That's like this plane. This plane is made of canvas and is filled by gas by that man.
Exactly.
Car gas. That's what I wear.
So they, on a quiet night, would run 8 missions. Some busier nights, they'd run 18 missions.
Christ.
It's very small.
Very small.
And, a mission was, like, taking off, getting to altitude, dropping bombs, getting back home safe, eh? And then reloading bombs.
Exactly.
Christ.
Only 6 bombs?
Yeah, but you got 6 bombs. Basically harassment bombing.
Harassment bombing.
It's harassment bombing, just suddenly boom, boom, boom,
I like that.
And so Nadia Popova was a pilot, and she ran 852 missions, and basically said that, and this is sort of a quote here, almost every time we had to sail through the wall of enemy fire, she volunteered, to just out of patriotism as well as a desire for revenge.
Fucking Bamf, that lady.
Yeah, well, basically when the Germans swept into the Soviet Union in June of 1941, her brother was killed, and the Nazis had basically commandeered her home to use as a Gestapo police station.
Oh, fuck that.
So she basically, she says she recounted the, quote, smiling faces of the Nazi pilots as they, like, strafed through crowds of people, like, running and gunning down these, women and children who were, fleeing because they're getting invaded by the Nazi army, hey?
Yeah.
Have you guys watched that doc on Netflix?
Which one?
About
World War II in color?
No. It was about that guy that like moved to the States, and they thought he was the butcher of the monster of Auschwitz.
I know who you're talking about.
Oh, I watched it. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
That was fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm very interrupty. And apparently someone hates that girl. I'm gonna be salty about that forever.
You know what, Sage? We're gonna keep you, so you don't mind them.
Thanks.
Yeah. You're gonna stick around whether you like it or not.
I'm gonna do an ASMR just talking shit about that person.
I would listen the shit out of that.
What a bitch! Fuck that guy. Whisker rub. Fuck you.
Fuck you.
I like that energy.
Fuck you.
Yes. One more quote from her here is she says, "We had an enemy in front of us, and we had to prove that we were stronger and more prepared." So in her first mission, she lost 2 of her friends when one of the bombers were shot down. Basically, their bombing tactic was this: they would fly in formations of 3. 2 of them would go in as decoys to attract searchlights and enemy gunfire and stuff at these 2 planes kind of flying around their encampment. And then in the darkness of night, a 3rd one would bomb the target. But here's the thing, is that they would idle the engines and just glide in quietly.
Yes.
Beauty. So you just shut her down. Yeah, just glide in, drop your bombs, fire your engine up, and go. Well, meanwhile, they're trying to shoot down the 2 other crop dusters that are
they targeted harassment bombing at its best.
The original bad bitches.
So imagine that you're in a German trench or a German encampment. You hear nothing. You have no sign of anything coming your way. And the world is silent around you. and seconds later, everything is exploding. Your friends are losing limbs, your fascist fuck buddies are dead, all because, like, the silent plane dropped the bombs.
I think I just came.
Yeah.
Imagine how many people have created so much ruckus because of a fascist smirk.
You guys and your ruckus.
I'm going to keep on using ruckus.
Wu-Tang Clan.
I got one more episode. I'm going to insert ruckus as much as possible.
Yeah, and then basically what would happen after that is they would switch places. Another one would idle and drop some more bombs on them, so they aren't expecting this. And then they basically did that until they were out of bombs.
It's like silence. Fuck.
And I mean,
fuck.
And I mean, by the time you figure it out, they're out of bombs.
Yeah, and they're gone.
And what was the total of bombs dropped?
It was like 23,000?
23,000 or something like that.
Wow.
And you have to realize how risky of a maneuver this is for the listeners that may not realize. When you idle your engines, you lose all altitude. You have to do the math and the timing right, or else you crash. Yeah. So as soon as you idle those engines, you're going to drop like a stone. So you have to time that shit perfectly.
So per Salt Bay bomb, that's 3,833 missions.
Fuck.
Oh my god.
I have a calculator.
Yes.
Not afraid to use it.
So anyway, it's really interesting because like their tactic works so well that rumors started to spread among the Nazis that these women had been given special injections or some sort of super Soviet pills that were giving these women perfect night vision because they were so effective at
it
this
can't
shit.
possibly be because they're just good at
wait.
Yeah, men have a really hard time with women being good at like literally anything. Especially war.
Must be special pills.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They got injections. Fuck that.
They got superhuman like Captain America fucking injections,
and they're so
and
quiet.
they're
Never
so.
stop talking.
Might it be the rods and cones in their eyes? Who will know?
And so anyway, the Nazis would have to deploy their Messerschmitt Bf 109 or the Focke-Wulf 190 to try to defend against these bombers.
Did you say Focke-Wulf?
Well,
he absolutely did.
Oh, the Focke-Wulf.
Focke-Wulf.
I was like, that's a really aggressive name.
Focke-Wulf is my sex tape.
Focke-Wulf is the name of your sex tape.
This is my thing, the Focke-Wulf.
That's right.
I don't know. It could be a pear, and I'd be impressed. This is my pear, the Focke-Wulf.
but now here's where like the genius of these like you know crop duster aircraft and Nazi warfare all kind of come into this fantastic mixture here. The women's aircraft had a top speed of 152 kilometers an hour, but the Messerschmitt and the Focke-Wulf had stall speeds of 164 kilometers an hour and 204 kilometers an hour. Ooh. So in your flight, you have to maintain a certain velocity, otherwise you drop like a stone. Mm-hmm. And the fastest that these crop dusters could go was lower than what the German fighter craft had to fly
above to stay airborne.
To stay airborne. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to take these on in these aircraft, it's really fucking difficult because, you can't line up and get in sync with them because you're going to crash.
Yeah, that's like trying to pursue somebody on a bicycle when they're walking super slow. Your bike's gonna tip the fuck over.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they would basically stall and fall out of the sky if they went below the speeds. And so these aircraft, because they couldn't even reach these speeds, oops. And then they were also very maneuverable compared to the German aircraft just because they're small, they're slow.
Yeah.
You can turn a lot tighter than these faster military aircraft could. And so anyway, there was one Nazi pilot who was able to shoot down 4 of these bombers on
Fuck that guy.
I guess it was July 31st and they were on a bombing campaign and he managed to shoot down like 4 of them. So that Popova, who I was speaking about earlier, had been shot down several times on their runs. And I guess one time she found herself downed among some retreating troops and civilians. So they encountered a wounded fighter pilot of Soviet origin. And they were sitting there just reading a book. And anyway, her and this
so fucking cool.
This young
like having
fellow,
been shot down,
and she's like, hey,
she's like reading a book. She's like, maybe.
well, she goes to this guy, and the guy's like reading, and he was wounded, and he was a fighter pilot, and she, was just downed, and so they're kind of in the area together, and they just start talking, and then they went their separate ways, and then during the war they met up again several times. And it's kind of a love story, because eventually in the final days of the war,
alone.
I'd watch that movie.
Yeah.
Well, these two, the man and this Popova, she met him again at the Reichstag on the final days of the war in Berlin, and they basically, graffitied the wall with their names.
Oh my god!
That war and Berlin Wall and stuff, it's all really romantic.
It is, and so anyway, they wrote their names on the wall of the Reichstag and then got married shortly after. I'm a real sucker for romance, what can I say?
Then he got her fucking pregnant, I bet.
Fuck it.
Communist romance is the best romance.
I mean, war has to be a little romantic because you're dealing with big forces of loss and gain and pain and so sometimes when those big forces are enacting upon you and your community, you have to take solace in the ones you love and the little pleasures you can and all that.
Cue "We Found Love in a Hopeless Place" by Rihanna.
Exactly.
Also, how horny do bombs make you?
But really, the war in itself is passionate. So
Yes.
Oh yeah. I mean, if I seen a woman shoot down multiple fascists, that's endearing as fuck.
Yeah,
that's right. Shoot down a fascist and find love.
That would do it for me.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
Sorry, Mr. Sage.
I really hope that one day that's the title of my autobiography.
Shoot down a fascist and find love.
Yes.
We're in turbulent times. You may be able to fulfill that.
Yeah.
So Popova was named the Hero of the Soviet Union, which was basically the nation's highest honor. She was awarded the Gold Star, the Order of Lenin, and the Order of the Red Star. During the years of World War II, the bombing regiment made over 24,000 combat night sorties. And sorties. Yeah, so this is Richard Bigley trying to interpret and translate Russian documents, so I'm not very good at it. But if I am correct,
I'm super pumped
in reading this, they bombed 17 crossings, 9 railway trains, 2 railway stations, 46 warehouses with ammunition and fuel. That would have been cool to watch.
Right?
Boom!
Bombing a fuel depot? Look up the Texas City disaster. That's a bunch of fuel and explosives just blowing the fuck up. That happening in the dead of night, in World War II.
Well, exactly.
I could fall in love to that.
Yeah. Right?
They also bombed 12 tanks, 1 aircraft, 2 barges, 76 vehicles, and 86 firing points, 11 searchlights. And so meanwhile, the Nazi camps found themselves with basically 811 fires and 1,092 explosions. And these women had also dropped 155 bags of ammunition and food to Allied troops in the battle. And the regiment basically logged 28,676 hours of combat.
Jesus.
Oh, wow.
So if my interpretation and understanding of the Russian documents that I was reviewing had been accurate, that's it. And so basically these badass women fought Nazi forces throughout the war from June to July. And... basically in June and July in 1944, they broke through the enemy's defense on the Prania River and fought for the liberation of Mogilev, Chershven, Baikov, Minsk, and Bialystok. And then in August of 1944, they participated in the liberation of the Polish cities of Augusto, Warsaw, and Ostrolok. From the Nazi troops. And then in January of 1945, we're getting closer to the end of the war here. They fought in East Prussia and contributed to basically kicking Hitler's ass all the way to the Naru River.
Yeah.
And then in March of 1945, they liberated the cities of... I don't know. You're Ukrainian. You should probably be able to understand that.
Dinya and Dansk.
There you go. Thank you so much.
That was awesome.
Thanks. Yeah.
I'm Ukrainian and we don't have g sounds, but Russians have g sounds.
Yeah. And and then in April of 45, this is the best part, and you don't want to miss this, the regiment assisted the ground units of the Soviet army in breaking through the enemy's defense on the Oder River. These bad bitches basically delivered bombing strikes against retreating Nazi forces.
Yeah,
isn't that cool? These fuckers are running away, and you're like, yeah, get some bombs, you motherfuckers.
That's for thinking we were on fucking steroids.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
Out the door, hate you, bitch.
Now, there's something in warfare called the rules of war, where generally you don't attack a retreating army, but when that retreating army has captured people and killed millions and has unlawfully...
literally the Nazi?
Literally Nazi. Yeah. You know what? Fascists?
You just can't call everyone you disagree with a Nazi, guys.
You can call Nazis Nazis.
Yeah. Absolutely call Nazis Nazis.
Yeah.
Then the last bombing mission was based in Swinemünde, a city near the modern-day borders of Germany and Poland. And basically they were going to take out a base which had constructed missiles for the war. So they bombed a missile manufacturing plant. So, fuck yeah. The regiment basically met at the end of the war just north of Berlin by Neubrandenburg, which is a community which is like an hour-long drive away from, like, you know, the Swinemünde, which is also about 2 hours.
Swinemünde.
Yeah, which is like 2 hour drive from Berlin. So about 2 hours, you know, highway speed out of Berlin is kind of where this Neubrandenburg was. And then...
So here to North Battleford. Well, I guess more here to Regina.
Yeah.
Regina's like
Regina,
like 2.5 hours away.
Well,
Are we bringing up Regina right now?
That was basically where they...
It's a family podcast. We're not talking about Regina.
You're triggering me right now.
And so anyway, that was where the regiment kind of met up at the very end, and you know that was where they camped out. And then April 30th of 1945, and Hitler does what all Nazis should do and puts a bullet in his brain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry about it.
I'm gonna say
spoiler alert.
You know, Hitler was a prick, but he did a good job on that one. Good choice. Yeah.
I mean, Hitler killed Hitler.
10 out of 10.
Hitler did kill Hitler. Yeah.
And then October 15th, 1945, the regiment was disbanded and demobilized, and the banner of the regiment was handed over to the Museum of the Soviet Army. So there you have it. All stories about our boys and our men and all that shit that's always talked about in war and documentaries and fiction. But these women, you know, they have their own story, and I just thought it was cool and should be shared. So I guess the moral is it okay to punch Nazis? Yes, it is.
Bomb them if possible.
Punch some more Nazis.
I would love to punch a Nazi.
Yes, just punch Nazis.
Punch Nazis forever.
Yeah.
Also, like, after all that, like, Hitler killed Hitler. Like, this is really resonating with me right now. It's probably the dank, but, like, wow.
Yes.
Hey, Nazis, follow your leader.
Yeah. Off you go.
If you want to be great like Hitler, you have to follow in his footsteps.
So, with Occultae Veritatis, I am Richard Bigley.
Sage Murray.
Ood Gallifrey.
And our guests today...
Selkie.
Ginger.
Joining late, Squishy.
Have a good
Love you,
night.
bye.
Mwah.
Deuces.
Beauty. Fuck. That turned out. I was expecting badass, but that turned out to be like awesome.
Yeah, no, they're my favorite.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Really I like that a lot.
There we have it, the Night Witches of the Soviet Army. And to play us out, we actually have the Soviet Air Force March, written in 1917 and played along the flying glory of the Soviet Air Force as they fought the Germans, and beyond. Enjoy, and see you in the after show.
Мы рождены, чтоб сказку сделать былью, преодолеть пространство и простор. Нам разум дал стальные руки крылья, а вместо сердца пламенный мотор. Все выше, выше и выше стремим мы полет наших птиц, и в каждом пропеллере дышит спокойствие наших границ. Бросая ввысь свой аппарат послушный, силе творя невиданный полет,
Мы сознаем, как крепнет флот воздушный, наш первый в мире пролетарский флот. Все выше, выше и выше стремим мы в полет наших птиц, и в каждом пропеллере дышит спокойствие наших границ. Наш острый взгляд пронзает каждый атом, наш каждый нерв решимостью одет. И верьте нам на всякий ультиматум, воздушный флот сумеет дать ответ. Все выше, выше и выше стремим мы в полет наших птиц, и в каждом пропеллере дышит спокойствие наших границ. Все выше, выше и выше стремим мы в полет наших птиц, и в каждом пропеллере дышит спокойствие наших границ.
Alrighty. Hello and welcome to the After Show. We are overdue to announce some new patrons in our Patreon cult family. If you want to join for as little as $1 a month, just go to www.patreon.com/ovpod. Your ability to vote on upcoming episodes, get bonus content, and participate in our bullshit behind-the-scenes Discord chat can be all yours for as little as $1 a month. But first, the new entrance into the cult. First, Kyle Edwards. Thank you and welcome to the cult. Shave your toes, crank your head to the sky, and give thanks to Valhalla. Next, Athena W. Thank you for joining the cult. Doug LeMay. Thank you for joining the cult. John Smith. Welcome to the Leagues of Valhalla's Angels. ASTT 100. Welcome to the cult. And finally, Q. Welcome to the cult. Q just joined, and they told me that they host a podcast themselves. When they get back to me with their podcast name, we will broadcast that as well, because we like to raise up the voices of our patrons and give light to the projects they're involved with. Just like Papa Bray's bullshit Twitch stream where he plays Fallout New Vegas. It's alright. Love you, Papa. Alrighty, that's the after show. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another look into the darkness of interesting things, or whatever we stumble upon. I've been Nude Gallifrey with the after show. Have a good night.